The fever had taken everything from her strength, her voice, even the will to fight, and when she collapsed beside the dusty trail 3 miles outside of Fort Lyon, Colorado, Willa Ferguson was certain she would die alone under the merciless August sun of 1878. Samuel Zimmerman had been riding for 2 days straight when he spotted what looked like a pile of discarded clothing off the side of the trail. His horse, a sturdy roan mare named Clementine, nickered nervously as they approached, and Samuel felt his chest tighten when he realized it was a woman. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth with a thud that sent up small clouds of dust. The woman was lying on her side, her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt, her lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Her dress, once probably a pretty blue calico, was torn and stained beyond recognition. "Miss." Samuel knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her throat to check for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady, and he released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Miss, can you hear me?" Willa's eyelids fluttered but did not open. A low moan escaped her lips, so quiet Samuel almost missed it. He looked around quickly, scanning the empty landscape for any sign of a wagon or traveling party, but there was nothing. Just endless prairie grass bending in the hot wind, and the mountains rising purple in the distance. He could not leave her. That much was certain. Fort Lyon was 3 miles back the way he had come, and the nearest ranch was even farther. Samuel was a practical man, raised on hard work, and the understanding that sometimes you had to make difficult choices. But there was no choice here. He would carry her. Samuel removed his canteen from his saddle and carefully tipped a small amount of water against Willa's lips. Most of it ran down her chin, but her throat worked reflexively, swallowing what little made it into her mouth. He tried again, with slightly better results this time. "All right, miss," he said softly, more to steady his own nerves than anything else. "I am going to get you to town. Just hold on." He was a tall man, just over 6 feet, with the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of ranch work. Even so, lifting Willa into his arms made him grunt with effort. She was small, probably no more than 5 feet 4 inches, but she was dead weight, her body limp and burning with fever. Samuel adjusted his grip, cradling her against his chest, and turned to look at Clementine. "I know, girl," he murmured to the mare. "This is not how I planned today either." He could have tried to drape Willa across the saddle, but the jostling might kill her in her condition. No, the only real option was to walk and carry her himself. Samuel had carried wounded men during his time as a ranch hand, had even pulled his younger brother from a collapsed barn once, but this felt different, more urgent, more personal somehow. He started walking, keeping his stride steady and even. The sun beat down on his shoulders, and within minutes, sweat was running down his back. Willa's head lolled against his chest, her breathing shallow and rapid. Every so often, she would mumble something incoherent, her fingers twitching against his shirt. The first mile was the hardest. Samuel's arms began to ache almost immediately, and he had to stop twice to adjust his grip. Each time he gave Willa more water, coaxing her to swallow, talking to her even though she could not hear him. "My name is Samuel," he said as he walked. "Samuel Zimmerman. I work at the Double R Ranch about 20 miles north of here. I was heading to Fort Lyon to pick up supplies when I found you." He paused, shifting her weight slightly. "You are going to be all right. I promise you that." By the second mile, Samuel's shoulders were on fire and his legs felt like lead. The August heat was brutal, shimmering off the ground in waves that made the horizon dance and blur. Clementine plodded along beside him, occasionally nudging his shoulder with her nose as if to encourage him. Samuel focused on putting one foot in front of the other, counting his steps to keep his mind occupied, Willa stirred in his arms, her eyes opening to narrow slits. "Where?" She whispered the word barely audible. "You are safe," Samuel told her immediately. "I am taking you to Fort Lyon. There is a doctor there." "Sick," she managed, then her eyes closed again. "I know, but you are going to be fine. Just hold on a little longer." The third mile nearly broke him. Samuel's arms were shaking with exhaustion, and he could feel blisters forming on his feet inside his boots. The town was visible now, a cluster of buildings in the distance, but it looked impossibly far away. He stopped to catch his breath, leaning against Clementine for support, and looked down at Willa's face. Her cheeks were flushed with fever, her breathing even more labored than before. "Come on," he muttered to himself. "You can do this. She needs you." He hoisted her up more firmly in his arms and kept walking. His vision swam and his mouth was so dry he could barely swallow, but he did not stop, could not stop. This woman's life depended on him getting her to the doctor, and Samuel Zimmerman had never failed at anything he set his mind to. He was not about to start now. When he finally stumbled onto the main street of Fort Lyon, people stopped to stare. A woman carrying a basket of vegetables let out a small cry of alarm. Two men standing outside the saloon hurried over. "What happened?" one of them asked. "Found her on the trail," Samuel rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. "Where is the doctor?" "Dr. Hawkins, 2 buildings down," the other man pointed. "Come on, I will help you." But Samuel shook his head, tightening his grip on Willa. "I have got her. Just show me the way." Dr. Hawkins was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and steady hands. He took one look at Willa and immediately cleared his examination table, gesturing for Samuel to lay her down. Samuel did so carefully, his arms trembling so badly he nearly dropped her at the last second. The doctor caught Willa's shoulder, steadying her, then looked up at Samuel with concern. "You look ready to collapse yourself, son. When is the last time you had water?" Samuel could not remember. He accepted the cup the doctor handed him and drank it in 3 long gulps. "What can you tell me about her?" Dr. Hawkins asked as he began examining Willa, checking her pulse and listening to her breathing with a stethoscope. "Nothing," Samuel admitted. "I found her beside the trail about 3 miles out. She was unconscious. I gave her water a few times on the way here, but she has barely been coherent." The doctor frowned, pressing his hand against Willa's forehead. "High fever, dehydration. Looks like she has been out there for at least a day, maybe more." He gently lifted one of her eyelids, examining her pupil. "Could be typhoid, could be influenza. Hard to say without more time." He glanced at Samuel. "You did the right thing bringing her in. Another few hours and she would have been dead." Samuel felt something twist in his chest at those words. The thought of this woman dying alone on that trail, of him riding past her without noticing, was unbearable. "Will she be all right?" he asked. "I will do everything I can," Dr. Hawkins said, "but the next 24 hours will be critical. I am going to need to get fluids in her, bring that fever down. It is going to be touch and go." He looked at Samuel more closely. "You have done your part, son. You should rest. There is a hotel across the street." But Samuel found himself shaking his head. "I would like to stay." "If that is all right." The doctor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself. Have a seat over there. This is going to take a while." Samuel watched as Dr. Hawkins worked, administering medicine, bathing Willa's forehead with cool cloths, trying to get her to drink more water. The afternoon wore into evening, and still Samuel sat in the wooden chair by the window, refusing to leave. Part of him knew it was irrational. He did not know this woman. She was a stranger he had found by chance. But he had carried her for 3 miles, had felt her heart beating against his chest, had made her a promise that she would be all right. He could not leave until he knew that promise would be kept. Night fell, and Dr. Hawkins lit the oil lamps. Willa's fever had not broken, but it had stopped climbing, which the doctor said was a good sign. She was still unconscious, though she seemed to be resting more comfortably now. Samuel dozed off in his chair sometime after midnight, his chin dropping to his chest. He woke to the sound of voices. Gray dawn light was filtering through the window, and Dr. Hawkins was speaking quietly to someone. Samuel blinked, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair, and saw that Willa was awake, or at least her eyes were open. The doctor was helping her drink from a cup, supporting her head with his hand. "That is it," Dr. Hawkins encouraged. "Slow sips. Good." Samuel stood up quickly, his heart pounding. Willa's eyes tracked the movement, focusing on him with obvious effort. Up close, with the dirt and sweat washed away, Samuel could see that she was young, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features and eyes the color of honey. Even exhausted and ill, she was beautiful. "She is going to be all right," Dr. Hawkins said, smiling at Samuel. "The fever broke about an hour ago. She is weak, and it will take time for her to recover fully, but she will live." The relief that washed over Samuel was so intense it made him lightheaded. He braced himself against the wall, letting out a long breath. "Thank you," Willa whispered, her eyes on Samuel. Her voice was hoarse and barely audible, but the words were clear. "You saved my life." Samuel moved closer to the examination table, suddenly feeling awkward. "I am just glad I found you in time. My name is Samuel Zimmerman." "Willa Ferguson," she replied. She tried to smile, but it was clearly an effort. "I owe you everything." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel said firmly. "Anyone would have done the same." Willa's expression suggested she did not believe that, but she was too tired to argue. Her eyes drifted closed again, and Dr. Hawkins gently laid her head back on the pillow. "She needs rest," he said quietly. "Lots of it. I am going to keep her here for at least a few days, make sure she is strong enough before she goes anywhere." "Where was she going?" Samuel asked. "Did she say?" "Not yet. She has been too weak to talk much, but I will find out and I will make sure she gets wherever she needs to go." The doctor clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "You should get some real rest yourself. You look like hell, if you will pardon my saying so." Samuel nodded slowly. He was exhausted, every muscle in his body aching. But as he looked at Willa sleeping peacefully on the table, something inside him resisted the idea of leaving. It made no sense. He had done what he set out to do. She was safe now in the doctor's care. There was no reason for him to stay. "I will be at the hotel," he heard himself say. "If anything changes, or if she needs anything, please send someone to get me." Dr. Hawkins raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I will do that." Samuel forced himself to walk out of the office and across the street to the Fort Lyon Hotel. He paid for a room, trudged up the stairs, and collapsed on the bed fully clothed. Sleep claimed him immediately. When he woke, it was late afternoon. Samuel sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his shoulders and back. He washed his face in the basin, changed into the spare shirt from his saddlebag, and headed back to the doctor's office. He told himself he just wanted to check on Willa's progress, to make sure she was still improving. It was the decent thing to do. But when he walked through the door and saw Willa sitting up in bed, sipping broth from a bowl, and her face lit up at the sight of him, Samuel felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with duty or decency, and everything to do with the way her honey-colored eyes seemed to see right through him. "Samuel," she said, and his name on her lips sounded like music. "I was hoping you would come back. How are you feeling?" He asked, moving to stand beside the bed. "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle," Willa admitted, managing a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you." She set the bowl aside carefully. "Dr. Hawkins told me you carried me 3 miles. I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been." Samuel shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. It needed to be done. Most men would have just put me on their horse and hoped for the best, Willa said quietly. You could have done that, it would have been easier, but you did not. You carried me because you knew it was safer. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his forearm. That was not just about doing what needed to be done. That was about caring whether I lived or died. Samuel looked down at her small hand resting on his arm. Her skin was still too pale, her fingers thin and delicate, but her grip was surprisingly firm. I could not have lived with myself if I had not done everything I could. Which tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are, Willa said. She withdrew her hand slowly, and Samuel found himself missing the warmth of her touch immediately. Dr. Hawkins emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a towel. Ah, Samuel, good to see you. Our patient is doing much better, as you can see. Another few days and she should be strong enough to travel if she takes it easy. Where were you headed, Miss Ferguson? Samuel asked. Do you have family in Fort Lyon? Willa's expression faltered and she looked down at her hands. No, I was traveling from Kansas. My father and I had a small farm there, but he died 3 months ago. Cholera. Her voice caught slightly. I could not keep the farm running on my own, so I sold it. I was heading to Denver. I have an aunt there, or at least I did 5 years ago. I was hoping she would take me in until I could find work. What happened on the trail? Dr. Hawkins asked gently. I was traveling with a wagon train, Willa explained, but I got sick about a week out of Fort Lyon. At first, I thought it was just the heat and exhaustion, but it kept getting worse. The wagon master told me I was slowing them down. He said they could not afford to wait for me to recover. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. They left me with a little water and some food and promised to send help from the next town. But the fever got so bad I could not think straight. I tried to walk, to catch up with them, but I just kept getting weaker. The last thing I remember is stumbling off the trail and lying down in the shade of a rock. I thought I was going to die there. Anger flared hot in Samuel's chest. They just left you, alone. They had children with them, Willa said, her tone defensive despite her obvious hurt. Families. They were worried about making it through the mountains before the weather turned. I understand why they made the choice they did. That does not make it right, Samuel said tightly. No, Willa agreed softly, but it is done, and if they had not left me, you might not have found me. So maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to. Samuel wanted to argue, but the logic in her words was undeniable. If Willa had still been with the wagon train, he never would have seen her, never would have carried her in his arms, never would have felt this strange pull toward her that he could not explain. Over the next 3 days, Samuel found himself spending more and more time at the doctor's office. At first, he told himself he was just checking on Willa's recovery, making sure she had everything she needed. But the truth was harder to ignore. He liked being near her. He liked the way she smiled when he walked through the door, the way she listened intently when he talked about the ranch, the way she laughed at his stories even when they were not particularly funny. Willa, for her part, seemed equally drawn to him. She asked questions about his life, his work, his dreams. She told him about growing up in Kansas, about her mother who had died when Willa was 12, about her father who had taught her to read and cipher and believe that she could be anything she wanted to be. He would have liked you, Willa said one afternoon. They were sitting in the doctor's office, the window open to let in the cool breeze. Willa was dressed now in a simple brown dress that one of the townswomen had donated, her hair braided neatly down her back. She looked stronger, healthier, the color returning to her cheeks. My father, I mean. He always said the measure of a man was not in what he did when people were watching, but in what he did when no one would ever know. You could have ridden right past me on that trail. No one would have blamed you or even known, but you stopped, you helped. That would have mattered to him." "It sounds like he was a good man," Samuel said. "The best," Willa agreed. "I miss him every day." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Samuel with those honey-colored eyes that seemed to see straight into his soul. "What about you? Do you have family?" "My parents have a farm in Missouri," Samuel said. "I have 2 brothers and a sister. I left home when I was 18 to see more of the world. Ended up working ranches in Kansas, then Nebraska, then here in Colorado. I have been at the Double R for 3 years now. It is good work, good people." "Do you ever think about going back? To Missouri, I mean?" Samuel considered the question. "Sometimes, but I like it here. The mountains, the open spaces. It feels like there is room to breathe, you know. Like you can be whoever you want to be without everyone watching and judging." Willa nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That is how I felt about Denver. Like it was a chance to start over, to build a new life. But now I wonder if I am just running away. From what? From grief. From loneliness. From the fact that I do not have anyone anymore." She said it matter-of-factly, but Samuel heard the pain underneath. "You have your aunt," he reminded her gently, "if she is even still there. If she even remembers me. If she is willing to take in a niece she has not seen in 5 years. Willa shook her head. "I am sorry. I do not mean to sound so hopeless. I just feel lost sometimes." Samuel reached out and took her hand before he could stop himself. Her fingers intertwined with his immediately, fitting perfectly. "You are not alone, Willa, not anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Samuel." The door opened and Dr. Hawkins walked in, stopping short when he saw them holding hands. A knowing smile crossed his face. "Am I interrupting something?" Willa pulled her hand back, blushing. "No, we were just talking." "Right," the doctor said, his tone suggesting he did not believe that for a second. He moved to check Willa's pulse and temperature, nodding approvingly. "You are doing wonderfully, Miss Ferguson. I think you are strong enough to travel now if you want to continue on to Denver. Though you should take it slow. No more than a few hours a day in a wagon for the first week or so." Willa's face fell. "I do not have a wagon or a horse. Everything I owned was with the wagon train. The stage comes through Fort Lyon twice a week," Dr. Hawkins said. "You could take that to Denver. It will cost you, though." "How much?" Willa asked quietly. When the doctor told her the price, Samuel saw Willa's shoulders sag. She shook her head. "I have some money from selling the farm, but not enough for that. I need what I have left to live on once I get to Denver, to pay for lodging until I can find work." Samuel's mind was racing. He could pay for her stage fare easily. He had saved most of his wages over the past 3 years, had very little to spend money on living at the ranch. But he knew Willa would never accept charity, especially not from him. She was too proud, too independent. "What if you did not go to Denver right away?" Samuel heard himself say. Willa looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean? The Double R Ranch is always looking for help." "The foreman's wife, Mrs. Crawford. She handles the house and the cooking for the hands. She has been complaining about needing an extra pair of hands, someone to help with the cleaning and mending and such. It does not pay a lot, but it includes room and board. You could work there for a few months, save up enough money to get to Denver properly, with enough to tide you over until you find work there." "I could not ask you to do that," Willa protested. "You are not asking, I am offering, and it is not charity. You would be working for your keep, same as the rest of us." Samuel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Willa, you said you felt lost. Maybe you do not need to figure everything out right away. Maybe you just need a place to catch your breath for a while. The ranch could be that place." Willa bit her lip, clearly torn. "What if your foreman says no?" "He would not. I told you Mrs. Crawford has been asking for help for months. You would be doing them a favor." Samuel paused. "And honestly, I would feel better knowing you were somewhere safe. That you are not traveling alone again, at least not until you are completely recovered." "You barely know me," Willa said softly. "Why do you care so much?" It was a fair question, and Samuel knew he should have a reasonable answer prepared. But the truth was complicated and frightening and wonderful all at once. From the moment he had found Willa on that trail, something had changed inside him. He had carried her for 3 miles, yes, but in those 3 miles, she had somehow worked her way into his heart. He could not imagine walking away from her now, could not imagine not knowing if she was safe and happy. It was too much, too soon, and it made no logical sense. But when had love ever been logical? The realization hit him like a physical blow. Love. He was falling in love with this woman he had known for less than a week. It was insane, it was impossible, it was absolutely, undeniably true. "Because I do," Samuel said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I just do." Something flickered in Willa's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or hope. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. If you are sure it is not too much trouble, I will come to the ranch, at least for a little while." Samuel felt like his chest might burst with relief and joy. "It is not any trouble at all, I promise." Dr. Hawkins cleared his throat, reminding them he was still in the room. "Well, that is settled then. Miss Ferguson, I recommend one more night of rest here, and then you should be well enough to travel tomorrow. Samuel, the double R is about 20 miles north, correct?" "Yes, sir." "It is a full day's ride, but we will take it slow." "Good. I will prepare some medicine for Miss Ferguson to take with her, just in case the fever tries to return. And Samuel," the doctor fixed him with a stern look, "you take care of this young woman. She has been through more than anyone should have to endure." "I will, sir," Samuel promised. "You have my word." That night, Samuel lay awake in his hotel room staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would take Willa to the ranch. She would live there, work there, be there every day. The thought filled him with an anticipation he had not felt in years. But beneath the excitement was a thread of fear. What if she did not feel the same way he did? What if, once she was stronger and more settled, she decided to go to Denver after all? What if he was setting himself up for heartbreak? But even as the question circled in his mind, Samuel knew he would not change his decision. Willa needed help, and he was in a position to provide it. Whether anything more came of it or not was beyond his control. He just had to have faith that things would work out the way they were meant to. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Samuel collected Clementine from the livery stable and rode to the doctor's office. Willa was waiting outside, wearing the brown dress and a borrowed bonnet. She had a small cloth bag with her belongings, though Samuel knew there could not be much in it. Dr. Hawkins stood beside her, giving her last-minute instructions. "Remember, plenty of rest. Do not overdo it, and if the fever comes back at all, you send for me immediately." "I will," Willa promised. She hugged the doctor quickly. "Thank you for everything. I would not be here without you." "You would not be here without Samuel," the doctor corrected, smiling, "but you are welcome just the same." Samuel dismounted and helped Willa up onto Clementine's back. The mare was patient and steady, perfect for a rider who was still recovering. Samuel swung up behind Willa, settling into the saddle and wrapping one arm around her waist to keep her secure. "Ready?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. Willa nodded, though Samuel felt her trembling slightly. Whether from nervousness or weakness, he was not sure. "Ready." They rode out of Fort Lyon at an easy walk, Samuel keeping Clementine to a pace that would not jostle Willa too much. The morning sun warmed their backs, and the prairie stretched out before them in shades of gold and green. Willa was quiet at first, but as the miles passed, she began to relax against Samuel's chest, her body fitting against his as if she belonged there. "It is beautiful out here," Willa said after a while. "So different from Kansas, more wild." "That is Colorado for you," Samuel agreed. "Untamed and unpredictable. You have to respect it, but if you do, it can be a good place to build a life." "Is that what you want to do? Build a life here?" Samuel considered the question carefully. A week ago, he would have said he was content to keep drifting, working ranches, saving money, seeing what opportunities came his way. But now, with Willa in his arms and the future suddenly full of possibilities, his answer was different. "I think maybe I do," he said slowly. "I think maybe I have been waiting for a reason to put down roots. I just did not realize it until now." Willa turned her head slightly, trying to see his face. "What changed?" Samuel tightened his arm around her waist, drawing her a fraction closer. "I found you." Willa's breath caught, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she settled back against him, her hand coming up to rest on his arm. "I am glad you did. Find me, I mean." They rode in comfortable silence after that, the rhythm of Clementine's hooves a soothing backdrop. Around midday, Samuel stopped to let the horse rest and to give Willa a break. They found a spot beside a small creek, shaded by cottonwood trees. Samuel helped Willa down from the saddle, steadying her when her legs wobbled slightly. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. "I thought I was stronger than this." "You are plenty strong," Samuel assured her, "but you nearly died less than a week ago. Give yourself time." They sat in the shade and ate the lunch Samuel had packed, bread, cheese, and apples purchased from the general store in Fort Lyon. Clementine drank from the creek and cropped at the grass, her tail swishing contentedly. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, and Samuel found himself wishing they could stay there forever, suspended in this perfect moment. "Tell me about the ranch," Willa said, breaking the silence. "What is it like?" "It is a good-sized operation," Samuel said. "The owner, Mr. Richardson, runs about 2,000 head of cattle. There are maybe 15 hands working there full-time, more during roundup and branding season. The main house is big and comfortable. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson are fair employers, treat their people well. The foreman, Jack Crawford, he is tough but honest. His wife, Mary, she is the one I told you about, handles the house, the cooking. She's got a good heart, but she works herself to the bone trying to keep up with feeding and looking after 15 hungry cowboys. And you think she will not mind me coming to help? Mind. She will probably want to throw a party." Samuel grinned. "Honestly, Willa, you will be doing her a huge favor, and she will appreciate having another woman around. It can get lonely for her out there, surrounded by men all day." Willa smiled, though Samuel could see the nervousness in her eyes. "I hope you are right." "I would hate to show up and be unwelcome." "You would not be," Samuel said firmly. "I promise." They rested for another half hour, then continued on their way. The afternoon sun grew warmer, and Samuel kept a careful eye on Willa, watching for any signs that she was tiring too much. But she seemed to be holding up well, though she leaned more heavily against him as the hours passed. It was late afternoon when they crested a rise, and the Double R Ranch came into view. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Behind it were the bunkhouse, the barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the pastures in the distance, and Samuel could see a few hands working near the barn. "There it is," he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Home." Willa sat up straighter, taking it all in. "It is bigger than I expected. Mr. Richardson has done well for himself. And he takes care of the place, keeps everything in good repair." Samuel guided Clementine down the slope toward the main house. "Come on, let's get you introduced." They rode into the yard, and immediately several of the ranch hands stopped what they were doing to stare. Samuel ignored them, riding straight up to the main house and dismounting. He helped Willa down, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow. The front door opened, and Jack Crawford stepped out onto the porch. He was a stocky man in his 40s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Samuel, we were not expecting you back until tomorrow." His gaze shifted to Willa, curiosity evident in his expression. "I know, sir. Something came up." Samuel took a breath. "This is Miss Willa Ferguson. I found her on the trail outside Fort Lyon. She had been left behind by a wagon train when she got sick. I brought her to the doctor, and she has recovered, but she has nowhere to go and no way to get where she was heading. I was hoping there might be a place for her here. I know Mrs. Crawford has been wanting help with the house." Jack's eyebrows rose, and he looked at Willa more closely. "Is that so?" "Yes, sir," Willa said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "I do not mean to impose, Mr. Crawford, but I am a hard worker, and I am willing to do whatever is needed. I can cook, clean, mend, anything you need. I just need a place to stay for a few months while I save up enough money to get to Denver." Before Jack could respond, a woman appeared in the doorway behind him. Mary Crawford was a plump, motherly woman with kind eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a bun. She took one look at Willa and hurried down the porch steps. "Oh, you poor dear," she exclaimed, taking Willa's hands in hers. "You look exhausted. Come inside right now and sit down. Jack, stop interrogating the girl and help me get her settled." Jack sighed, but there was affection in his eyes. "Yes, dear. Samuel, take care of your horse and then come find me in the barn. We need to talk." Samuel nodded, watching as Mary ushered Willa into the house, clucking over her like a mother hen. He caught Willa's eye just before she disappeared inside, and she gave him a small, grateful smile that made his heart soar. He led Clementine to the barn, unsaddled her, and rubbed her down carefully. A few of the other hands drifted over, clearly curious about the woman Samuel had brought back with him. He gave them the abbreviated version of the story, leaving out the parts that felt too personal, too private. When he finally made his way back to the barn office, Jack was waiting. The foreman gestured for Samuel to sit down, then leaned back in his chair, studying him. "You want to tell me what is really going on here?" Jack asked bluntly. "I told you. I found her on the trail, brought her to the doctor. I heard that part. What I want to know is why you brought her here instead of putting her on a stage to Denver or wherever she was headed." Jack's expression was not unkind, just shrewd. "You have been working here 3 years, Samuel. In all that time you have never asked for a favor, so why now?" "For this girl," Samuel met Jack's gaze steadily. "Because she needed help and I was in a position to give it. That is all." "That is all," Jack repeated, skeptical. Samuel hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Jack was a fair man, but he did not appreciate being lied to. "All right. The truth is, I care about her. I know it is fast, and I know it probably sounds crazy, but from the moment I found her, I felt like I needed to protect her, to make sure she was safe. And the idea of her traveling to Denver alone, still recovering, with no guarantee her aunt would even be there to help her, it just did not sit right with me." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Then he nodded slowly. "I can respect that. And Mary has been driving me crazy asking for help, so if this Miss Ferguson is willing to work, I've got no objection to her staying on. But Samuel, you need to understand something. If things go south between you two, if it causes problems on the ranch, that is going to reflect on you. You are bringing her here, that makes her your responsibility." "I understand, sir, and I promise there would not be any problems. See that there are not." Jack stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "Go on. I am sure Mary has got 100 questions for you." Samuel found Willa in the kitchen, sitting at the big wooden table with a cup of tea in her hands. Mary was bustling around, slicing bread and laying out cold chicken and pickles. She beamed when Samuel walked in. "There you are. I was just telling Miss Ferguson about the ranch. She's going to stay in the spare room off the kitchen. It is small, but it has a good bed and plenty of light, and starting tomorrow she can help me with the cooking and cleaning." Mary set a plate in front of Willa and then fixed one for Samuel. "Sit down and eat. You both look like you have not had a decent meal in days." Samuel sat down across from Willa, and their eyes met over the table. Relief and gratitude shone in her expression, and Samuel felt the now familiar warmth spread through his chest. They had made it. She was safe, settled, and he would get to see her every day. It was more than he had dared to hope for. Over the next few weeks, Willa settled into life at the Double R Ranch. She proved to be everything she had promised: a hard worker, quick to learn, and unfailingly pleasant. Mary took to her immediately, treating her like the daughter she had never had. The ranch hands were a bit more cautious at first, unsure what to make of a woman their own age living on the ranch, but Willa won them over quickly with her warm smiles and easy conversation. Samuel, for his part, found himself inventing reasons to be near the main house. He volunteered for chores that took him past the kitchen window. He lingered over meals, even when the other hands had already headed back to work. He could not seem to help himself. Being near Willa had become as necessary as breathing. Willa seemed equally drawn to him. She would look up and smile whenever he entered a room, her eyes lighting up in a way that made Samuel's pulse race. They fell into an easy companionship, talking and laughing together whenever they had a spare moment. But beneath the friendship was something deeper, a current of attraction and longing that grew stronger every day. It was Mary who finally said something. One evening, about a month after Willa's arrival, she pulled Samuel aside after supper. "You are going to have to tell her how you feel, you know," Mary said without preamble. Samuel nearly choked on his coffee. "What? Oh, do not play dumb with me, Samuel Zimmerman. I have got eyes. I see the way you look at that girl, and more importantly, I see the way she looks at you." Mary smiled, her expression fond. "You are both walking around here like lovesick puppies, and it is high time somebody did something about it." "I do not want to rush her," Samuel protested. "She has been through so much. She needs time to recover, to figure out what she wants. She has had time, and from where I am standing, what she wants is pretty clear. She wants you, you fool." Mary shook her head. "But if you are too scared to make a move, she is going to assume you are not interested. She is going to start making plans to go to Denver, and then where will you be?" The thought of Willa leaving made Samuel's chest tighten painfully. "You think I should tell her?" "I think you should court her properly. Take her on a picnic or a walk. Spend some time alone with her, away from this house and all the nosy ranch hands. Talk to her, Samuel. Tell her what is in your heart. What is the worst that could happen? She could say no," Samuel thought. "She could tell me she does not feel the same way. She could break my heart." But Mary was right. He could not keep walking around in this limbo, too afraid to take the next step. Willa deserved to know how he felt, and Samuel deserved to know if there was a chance for something more between them. The next day, Samuel found Willa in the garden behind the main house. She was kneeling beside a row of tomato plants, her sleeves rolled up and dirt smudged on her cheek. She looked healthy now, her skin glowing, her movements sure and strong. It was hard to believe she was the same woman he had found half dead on the trail 2 months ago. "Willa," he said, and she looked up, smiling. "Samuel, what are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be mending fences on the south pasture." "I was. I am. I just wanted to ask you something first." Samuel took off his hat, twisting it in his hands. "There is a spot about a mile from here, up in the hills, a meadow with wildflowers and a view of the mountains. I was thinking maybe tomorrow, if you have got some time, we could ride up there. Have a picnic, just the two of us." Willa's eyes widened slightly and a blush crept into her cheeks. "A picnic, if you want. I mean, you do not have to. I just thought it might be nice to spend some time together, away from the ranch." Samuel was rambling now, nerves getting the better of him. "But if you are too busy, or if you would rather not, I would love to," Willa interrupted, her smile growing. "That sounds wonderful, Samuel." Relief flooded through him. "Good, great. I will talk to Mary, make sure she can spare you for a few hours." "I am sure she would not mind," Willa said, her tone slightly teasing. "In fact, I think she might insist on it." Samuel grinned, feeling lighter than he had in days. "Tomorrow, then, after lunch, I will be ready." Samuel spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation. He finished his work on the fences, then spent an hour cleaning his best shirt and polishing his boots. That night, he lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out exactly what he was going to say to Willa. He wanted to tell her how he felt, but he did not want to scare her off. He wanted to ask if she felt the same way, but he was terrified of what he might hear in response. By the time the sun rose, Samuel had given up on sleep entirely. He went through his morning chores in a daze, barely hearing the good-natured ribbing from the other ranch hands who had clearly heard about his plans from Mary. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, lunch was over, and it was time. Samuel saddled Clementine and one of the gentler horses for Willa, then rode to the main house. Willa was waiting on the porch, wearing a pretty blue dress that brought out the gold in her eyes. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and Samuel thought she looked like something out of a dream. "You look beautiful," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Willa blushed, pleased. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Samuel helped her into the saddle, trying not to think about how her waist felt under his hands, and then they set off. The meadow was about a mile northeast of the ranch, accessible via a narrow trail that wound up through the foothills. It was a place Samuel had discovered early in his time at the Double R, a spot he came to when he needed to think or just be alone. When they crested the final rise and the meadow spread out before them, Willa gasped. "Oh, Samuel, it is beautiful." And it was. The meadow was carpeted with wildflowers in shades of purple, yellow, and white. Aspen trees ringed the edges, their leaves whispering in the breeze. Beyond, the mountains rose stark and majestic against the blue sky. It was the kind of place that made you believe in something bigger than yourself. They dismounted, and Samuel spread a blanket in the shade of an aspen. Mary had packed them a basket with fried chicken, biscuits, fruit, and even a jar of lemonade. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily the way it always did between them. When the food was gone and the dishes packed away, they lay back on the blanket, looking up at the clouds drifting overhead. Willa's hand was only inches from Samuel's, and he felt the almost magnetic pull to close that distance. But he hesitated, unsure. "Samuel," Willa said quietly. "Can I ask you something, of course? Why did you really bring me here? To the ranch, I mean. It was not just about helping me find work, was it?" Samuel turned his head to look at her. She was watching him, her expression open and vulnerable, and he knew this was the moment. No more hiding, no more pretending. "No," he admitted. "It was not just about work. I brought you here because I could not stand the thought of you leaving. Because from the moment I found you on that trail, I felt connected to you in a way I have never felt with anyone else. I know it does not make sense. I know it is too fast. But Willa, I am falling in love with you. I think maybe I have been since the day I carried you into Fort Lyon." Willa's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "It is not too fast, and it makes perfect sense. Because I am falling in love with you too, Samuel. I have been trying to tell myself it is just gratitude, that I am confusing my feelings because you saved my life. But it is more than that, so much more. When I am with you, I feel safe and happy and like maybe everything is going to be all right after all." Samuel sat up, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "You mean that? Every word." Willa sat up too, taking his hands in hers. "I love you, Samuel. I think I have loved you since you promised me I was going to be all right, back when I was too weak to even remember my own name." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" "I was hoping you would," Willa whispered. Samuel closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Willa's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and she kissed him back with a fervor that took his breath away. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you," Samuel said again, because he could not seem to say it enough. "I love you too," Willa replied, and the joy in her voice made Samuel feel like he could fly. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the meadow, talking and kissing and making plans for a future they were both just beginning to believe in. Samuel told Willa about his dreams of someday having his own ranch, a small place where he could raise horses and cattle. Willa told him about her dream of a home filled with laughter and love, the kind of home her parents had created before her mother died. "We could do that together," Samuel said, the idea taking root in his mind. "Build that life. Not right away, but someday, when we have saved enough money." "I would like that," Willa said softly. "I would like that very much." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they reluctantly packed up and rode back to the ranch. Samuel was keenly aware of the curious looks they received when they rode into the yard, but he did not care. Let people talk. He was in love, and he was not going to hide it. Over the next few months, Samuel and Willa's courtship became the talk of the ranch. They were inseparable whenever Samuel was not working, taking walks in the evening, sitting together during meals, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. The other ranch hands teased Samuel mercilessly, but it was good-natured, and most of them were genuinely happy for him. Jack Crawford pulled Samuel aside one day in late October. "I suppose you are planning to marry this girl," he said, his tone casual. Samuel did not hesitate. "Yes, sir, as soon as she will have me." Jack nodded, as if that was the answer he had been expecting. "Mr. Richardson wants to expand the horse operation. He has been talking about needing someone to manage it, someone who knows horses and can be trusted to run things without constant supervision. I recommended you." Samuel's eyes widened. "Sir, the position comes with a house. Small, 2 bedrooms, but it is solid and well built. It is about a mile from the main ranch, and the pay is better than what you are making now as a hand." Jack clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "I figure a man getting married needs a house and a steady income. This is both." Samuel could barely process what he was hearing. "I do not know what to say. Say yes, and then go propose to that girl before someone else snatches her up." Samuel did not need to be told twice. That evening he asked Willa to take a walk with him. They ended up at the corral, watching the horses mill about in the fading light. Samuel's heart was pounding and his palms were sweating, but he knew this was right. "Willa," he began, taking her hands in his, "I know we have only known each other a few months. But in those months, you have become the most important person in my life. I cannot imagine waking up in a world where you are not by my side. I do not have much to offer you right now, but I have got a good job, and Mr. Richardson is giving me a house. And I have got more love for you than I even knew I was capable of feeling." He dropped to one knee, and Willa's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Willa Ferguson, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here in Colorado, and let me spend every day for the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me?" "Yes," Willa sobbed, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, of course I will marry you. I love you so much, Samuel." They kissed there in the twilight, and Samuel felt like the luckiest man alive. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Mary helped Willa make a dress from cream-colored linen, and Samuel wore his best suit. The ranch hands all attended, along with Mr. and Mrs. Richardson and a few people from town. Dr. Hawkins made the trip from Fort Lyon to see the woman whose life he had helped save marry the man who had carried her to him. "I knew the moment I saw you two together that this was how it would end," Dr. Hawkins told them at the reception Mary had organized in the main house. "You could see it in the way you looked at each other, like you had found something precious and you were not ever going to let it go." "We are not," Samuel agreed, his arm around Willa's waist. "Not ever." They moved into the small house on the edge of the ranch property, and Samuel took over management of the horse operation. Willa continued to help Mary a few days a week, but she also threw herself into making their house a home. She planted a garden, made curtains for the windows, and filled the rooms with laughter and warmth. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were hard days when the work was grueling and money was tight. There were moments of doubt and fear, particularly when winter set in and the snow piled high around their little house. But through it all, Samuel and Willa had each other. They faced every obstacle together, and their love only grew stronger. In the spring, Willa told Samuel she was expecting a baby. He was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. Their son was born in late autumn, a healthy boy with Samuel's dark hair and Willa's honey-colored eyes. They named him Thomas, after Willa's father. 2 years later, a daughter followed. They named her Rose, and she had Willa's delicate features and Samuel's stubborn determination. The little house that had once seemed small now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Samuel could not imagine anything more perfect. As the years passed, Samuel and Willa's dreams began to take shape. Samuel saved every penny he could, and with Mr. Richardson's blessing, he purchased a small parcel of land adjacent to the Double R. It was not much, maybe 100 acres, but it was theirs. Samuel built a bigger house with his own hands, working in the evenings and on Sundays. It took 3 years, but when it was finished, it was everything they had dreamed of. A 2-story farmhouse with a big kitchen, a porch that wrapped around the front, and enough bedrooms for a growing family. They added horses and a small herd of cattle. Willa managed the accounts and the household with the same quiet competence she brought to everything she did. Thomas and Rose grew strong and healthy, and 2 more children followed, another boy named Matthew and a little girl named Grace. The house was always full of noise and love, and the kind of organized chaos that came with raising 4 children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Willa took a rare evening to themselves. They sat on the porch of the house Samuel had built, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were inside with Mary, who had insisted on babysitting so Samuel and Willa could have some time alone. "You ever think about that day I found you?" Samuel asked, his arm around Willa's shoulders. Willa leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "All the time. Sometimes I still cannot believe it was real, that you actually stopped, that you carried me all those miles. You saved my life, Samuel." "You saved mine too," Samuel said quietly. "I did not even know I was looking for something until I found you, but you gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a family, a reason to put down roots and build something lasting. We built it together, Willa corrected gently. That is what makes it special. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the horses in the pasture whinnied softly in response. I love you, Willa said, breaking the silence. More now than I did the day we got married, more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too, Samuel replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Forever and always. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life. Thomas grew into a fine young man who shared his father's love of horses. Rose became a talented artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the landscape and animals. Matthew was the wild one, always getting into mischief but with a heart as big as the sky. Grace, the baby, was gentle and quiet, with a deep love for books and learning. Samuel and Willa watched their children grow with pride and joy, supporting them through triumphs and setbacks. They celebrated holidays and birthdays, weathered droughts and harsh winters, mourned losses and celebrated victories. Through it all, their love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Thomas was 18, he announced his intention to work full-time on the ranch. Samuel felt his heart swell with pride. This was what he had hoped for, though he had never wanted to pressure his son into following in his footsteps. Together, father and son expanded the operation, purchasing more land and increasing the herds. Rose fell in love with a young man from Fort Lyon, a carpenter with kind eyes and gentle hands. Samuel walked her down the aisle on a beautiful June day, and when he placed her hand in her husband's, he thought his heart might burst with bittersweet joy. Matthew decided to become a teacher, heading east to attend a university. It was hard watching him go, but Samuel and Willa were immensely proud of his ambition and intelligence. Grace followed a few years later, pursuing her own education and dreams. The ranch house that had once been full of children gradually grew quieter, but it was never empty. Thomas built a house nearby with his wife, and soon grandchildren were running through the fields where Samuel and Willa's own children had played. Rose and her husband visited often, bringing their growing family. Matthew and Grace came home for holidays and special occasions, filling the house with laughter and love. On a warm summer evening in 1908, Samuel and Willa celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and the kind of joy that came from being surrounded by people you loved. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were carried off to bed, Samuel and Willa found themselves alone on the porch once again. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love all those years ago. 30 years, Willa said, shaking her head in wonder. How did that happen? One day at a time, Samuel replied, taking her hand. One sunrise, one sunset, one moment of choosing to love you over and over again. Willa squeezed his hand, tears shimmering in her eyes. Do you remember what you said to me that day in the meadow, when you first told me you loved me? I said it did not make sense, that it was too fast, Samuel recalled, smiling at the memory, and I said it made perfect sense. Willa turned to face him fully, her expression tender. I was right, Samuel. Everything that happened, from you finding me on that trail to this moment right here, it all makes perfect sense. It was supposed to happen exactly the way it did. Samuel pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her the way he had done countless times over the past 3 decades. I would do it all again. Every moment, every choice, every mile I carried you, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I know you would, Willa whispered. That is who you are. That is the man I fell in love with." They stood there together, watching the stars come out one by one over the mountains, and Samuel felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what happiness looked like. Not a single perfect moment, but a lifetime of moments strung together like pearls on a string. The hard times and the good times, the laughter and the tears, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. All of it together made a life worth living. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Willa grew old together with grace and dignity. They faced the challenges of aging the same way they had faced everything else, together, with love and determination. When Samuel's back started to ache from years of hard work, Willa would rub it gently in the evenings. When Willa's hands grew stiff with arthritis, Samuel would help her with the tasks that had become difficult. They remained active in the ranch as long as they were able, but gradually, Thomas took over more of the day-to-day operations. Samuel transitioned into an advisory role, his years of experience invaluable to his son's leadership. Willa continued to manage the household accounts and help with the grandchildren, who adored their grandmother's stories and patient guidance. On a crisp autumn day in 1920, Samuel and Willa celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. The family gathered once again, now spanning 3 generations. Samuel looked around the table at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I want to say something," he announced, standing up with some effort. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to him. 42 years ago, I made the best decision of my life. I asked this woman to marry me, and miracle of miracles, she said yes." He looked down at Willa, who was smiling up at him with tears in her eyes. "Everything good in my life came from that one decision. Every person sitting at this table exists because I found Willa on that trail and chose to help her, because we chose to love each other." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "I do not know what the future holds. None of us do. But I know this. Love is the most important thing. The only thing that really matters. So love each other. Take care of each other. Build lives that matter. That is the legacy Willa and I want to leave behind." The room erupted in applause and Samuel sat down, suddenly exhausted. Willa took his hand, squeezing it gently. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "I meant every word," Samuel replied. As the evening wore on and the family eventually dispersed, Samuel and Willa sat together in their favorite spot on the porch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of hay and wood smoke. In the distance, the mountains stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "So happy I could burst," Willa replied. "We have built something beautiful, Samuel. A family, a home, a legacy. Not everyone gets that." "We were blessed," Samuel agreed, "but we also worked for it. We chose it every single day." "We did," Willa said softly. She leaned her head on his shoulder and Samuel wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. They sat like that until the stars filled the sky. 2 people who had faced death and found life, who had known loss and discovered love, who had started with nothing and built everything. They had been given a second chance that day on the trail outside Fort Lyon, and they had made the most of every moment since. Years later, when Samuel was in his late 70s and Willa, a few years younger, they both knew their time was growing short. They had lived full, rich lives, and neither of them had any regrets. They spent their days surrounded by family, sharing stories and wisdom with the younger generations. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching yet another Colorado sunset, Willa turned to Samuel with a smile. "Do you remember what you promised me?" she asked. "I have made you a lot of promises over the years," Samuel replied, his voice a bit weaker than it used to be but still warm with affection. "Which one? When you were carrying me to Fort Lyon, you promised me I was going to be all right." Willa's eyes were bright with tears and joy. "You kept that promise, Samuel. You kept it every single day for the rest of my life." Samuel felt his own eyes fill with tears. "You were worth every step, every moment, every promise." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Willa Ferguson Zimmerman. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Willa replied. "My hero, my husband, my love." They kissed then, a soft, gentle kiss that held 40+ years of love and devotion. And as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple and pink, Samuel and Willa sat together, grateful for every moment they had been given, and every choice that had led them to this perfect life they had built together. Their story became legend in Fort Lyon and the surrounding ranches. People spoke of the cowboy who carried a dying woman 3 miles to save her life, and how that act of compassion had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. Children grew up hearing the tale, learning from it that kindness and courage could change everything, that love was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the hardest moments. Samuel lived to be 82 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep with Willa beside him, her hand in his. Willa followed him 3 years later, her heart simply unable to go on without the man who had been her everything for nearly half a century. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a view of the mountains they had both loved so much. Their children and grandchildren continued the legacy they had started, running the ranch with the same dedication and love that Samuel and Willa had shown. The story of how their grandparents had met, of the cowboy who carried a sick woman 3 miles to save her life and ended up finding his soulmate, was told and retold at family gatherings for generations. And in Fort Lyon, Colorado, where it all began, people still talked about Samuel and Willa Zimmerman, about the power of compassion, the strength of true love, and the beautiful life that could grow from the simple choice to help someone in need. Their story became a reminder that sometimes, in the most desperate moments when all hope seems lost, fate intervenes. Sometimes, the person who saves your life becomes the person you cannot live without. Sometimes, 3 miles can change everything. The house Samuel built still stands on the land he and Willa purchased all those years ago, now home to their great-great-grandchildren. The ranch continues to thrive, a testament to the foundation Samuel and Willa laid. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and purple, you can almost imagine 2 figures sitting on that old porch, hands entwined, watching the stars come out and counting their blessings. Because that is what love does. It endures beyond death, beyond time, beyond the limits of a single lifetime. Samuel and Willa's love story did not end when they died. It lived on in their children, their grandchildren, and all the generations that followed. It lived on in the ranch they built, in the land they tended, in the values they passed down. It lived on in the retelling of their story, inspiring others to choose compassion, to believe in second chances, to fight for love even when the odds seemed impossible. The cowboy and the woman he saved became more than just 2 people who fell in love. They became a symbol of what is possible when we choose to help others, when we open our hearts to unexpected possibilities, when we commit fully to the people we love. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that we are all connected, that small acts of kindness can have profound ripples, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single choice to do the right thing. In the end, Samuel Zimmerman did not just save Willa Ferguson's life that day on the trail outside Fort Lyon. He gave her a reason to live, a future to dream about, a love that sustained her through all the years that followed. And Willa, in turn, gave Samuel purpose and joy and a family that would carry his legacy forward long after he was gone. Their love story was not perfect. They had faced challenges and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But they had faced them together, and that made all the difference. They had built a life based on mutual respect, unwavering support, and a love that grew deeper with each passing year. They had raised children who understood the value of hard work and compassion. They had created a home filled with warmth and laughter. They had lived fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. And so, the story of Samuel and Willa Zimmerman became woven into the fabric of Colorado history, a reminder of the Wild West's capacity for both hardship and hope, for loss and love, for endings and new beginnings. It was a story that would be told for generations, a testament to the enduring power of human kindness and the transformative nature of true love. It was a story that began with 3 desperate miles and ended with a lifetime of happiness, proving once and for all that sometimes the longest journey leads us exactly where we are meant to be.